So I want to show you how I made this ear saver, which is just a bit of scrap fabric from my DIY masks with a button sewn on either side. And you can use different tools based on what you have. So what I start with is a piece of fabric that's 2 inches wide and then several inches long, whatever I have in my scrap. And then I take a regular piece of paper about a 1/2 inch wider than my fabric, and I fold over the paper over each edge of the fabric. And then I fold the paper again so that the edges of the fabric meet in the middle, and then I fold it again. And then now I have a tube of fabric that has folded my fabric into a wonderful tape. So I'm going to take and I'm going to cut this edge with my pinking shears so that it's at a corner. And so I'm going to do it so as a nice corner. So now that's a corner, and then that's all ready to sew. So I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine. So then I'm going to look at my fabric and make sure that I've got the edge that I want to sew. So I want to sew on this side. So I'm going to put it in my machine, and I'm going to put my presser foot down. And then I'm going to hold my thread for a couple stitches, make sure that I'm on the right stitch. And then I'm going to back stitch a bit. Now that the needle's in, I'm just going to take my fabric, that's held by the needle, and I'm just going to slide my paper. So I get that wonderful fold in my fabric just using my paper. And I'm going to sew. And I'm going to slide my paper down. I'm just going to check my fold here. Seems like I got a little off. There we go. My fold feels a little off. I'm going to recheck my fold here. I'm going to fold my edges of my paper and then fold them into the middle and then in the middle again. Yeah, just double checking I did that the way I wanted to. So if you have a bias tape maker, obviously you could use that, but I'm just using paper. And then I'm going to just slide my paper down. This is another section of the fabric that's got a big long fringe on it, but that's okay. You can totally make it work. We're almost at the end here. So make sure I'm nice and neat all the way to the end. Now I did a little back stitching on the end. And then I'm just going to cut our threads. And now I have this big, long, perfect piece of fabric. And all I used was a piece of paper. So let's go back to the cutting table. And then I'm going to take this, and different people have different length back of the head. I measured myself, and I was about 9 inches, and my spouse was about 7. So I'm going to take this one and give it a measure, and let's make it a bigger one, so it's more like my size. Let's make it 9 inches. I'm going to take my pinking shears, and I'm going to cut off one side of it at an angle. And then I'm going to just do a little measure until we get to about 9 inches. And then I'm going to angle it with my pinking shears like that. Then I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to iron it real quick. I have a little hot iron right behind me. I'm just going to hit that with the iron because it's so that's been just ironed just a little bit. And then I'm going to take this corner where the point is, and I'm going to just take my time and I'm going to stuff that inside the opening of the tape. So I like to use a chopstick, if that works. Just take my time and stuff that in there. And another tool that's really helpful besides my chopstick is my craft awl, because it's got a sharp point on it. I can grab the fabric and stuff it in there. I'll maybe take my chopstick and see if I got it really stuffed in there. So now I'm going to just take the edges and put them in as well. Careful to not stab myself with my craft awl. This is my 5th one that I made. I made 4 earlier today, and then I thought, well, I'll make a couple more and show folks what I'm doing. I just don't like the way that one went in. I wonder if I should. My corner's nice, and it seems like my corner's okay. I'll just check that. open it up a little bit and take the corner and stuff it into the opening. Yep. So if you have a bias tape maker, you can use that. If you don't, like me, you can use a piece of paper. I saw them on Etsy and thought, oh, those look cool. But then I was like, do I really want to order more stuff? Or so these are the tools I already had. Okay, so I just was a little patient with that, and then I got it all in. So now it's got a nice end on there. See? And I'll do the other side. So I'm going to just open it up a little bit. Take the corner and stuff it inside the opening. So if you were not a sewist, you could make these by knitting or crocheting fabric. And so you knit or crochet a band and then just put a button on either side, and it would work just as well. You just have to take into account how stretchy it was or wasn't when you did it. Okay, so now both ends, I've tucked both ends in, so those are neat. So I'm going to just steam this so it's flat on my little ironing area. Nice and flat. I'm going to pick a couple buttons. I've pulled some buttons out that I think would work okay. Maybe get two that are alike. Here we go. So 2 buttons. Okay, then we'll go back to the sewing area. So next, I'm gonna just sew down the short side and then all the way along the long side and then back over the other short side. So just down all the way and then back over. So it's a little thick because of the extra layers of fabric. So I'm gonna go slow, kind of hand guide it. And then give it a turn. And it gets a little thicker. I'm just hand doing it with the crank. On the ends. And now that is all top stitched. So after top stitching, I'm going to just cut our threads so that we don't have a bunch of threads to worry about. So those are all okay. So now we have our nice tape like piece, and then I'm going to sew a button on both sides, both ends. So to do that, you could just sew the button by hand. I am going to sew it on with my button presser foot, which is got a funny little shape, like a little notch, and I'm going to just put that on my sewing machine using the little hand screw to get that right in place. Then once that's on my machine, I'm going to check where my threads are, make sure I have lots of thread. Then I need to disengage my feed dogs, which are these little things here that pull the fabric forward. So I've disengaged those, and then I've got my buttonholer on. And then the buttonholer, I don't know why I call it a holer, buttonhole presser foot. So then I just line up my fabric and then the button so that the holes are in over the notches. And so I'm going to move my needle so it's all the way over to the right and over one of the holes, and I'm going to just line that up, and then I'm going to press the presser foot down when I think it's lined up well. Then I'm going to hand crank, that's my dog, I'm going to hand crank the needle, seeing if I've lined it up well. I have. So I'm going to go in and out with a straight stitch a few times. Then I'm going to switch it once the needle is drawn back up. I'm going to switch the stitch to a zigzag stitch. And then I'm going to make sure that, again, the needle is going in the hole so I don't break my needle or the button. And then I went back and forth a few times. And then now I'm going to position it over the place I was in the first spot, and then make sure that the needle is up so that I can change the stitches. And so then now it's back to straight stitch. So I started with straight stitch, then I did zigzag, now I'm doing straight stitch, and then that's it. It's attached. So now I'm going to pull it off. And I'll deal with those threads later. I'm just going to leave them nice and long and cut those off. So there's one attached button. My dog is bored. The shelter in place is not a very exciting time for her. So I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to position my fabric. I'm going to position my button so that it is right underneath the little notches where I want my button to be. Let's see if I think I got that. And then lower that presser foot when I feel like I got it right in the grooves there. And then I'm going to hand crank the needle and see if I got it in the opening good. Yep. Straight stitch a few times, and then while the needle's up, I'm going to change my stitch to zigzag, and then just hand do it to make sure I got it in the openings okay. I did. Turn it back and forth several times, and then when I'm back in position again over the first hole, I'm going to change my stitch back to straight. I'll do straight a few times, and then the button is attached. I'm using a Singer Rocketeer. It's from the Slantomatic line back in the early 60s when all the machines were made from metal. And now my ear saver is done except for those little threads. So let's get those little threads. I'm going to come over to the cutting area. And what I like to do with those is you'll have two threads on each side of each button, and then I just like to tie them off. It just makes me feel extra secure. So I'm going to do that. And then there's two threads on the back. So I'll just tie those off. And on the other side. Now, if I didn't have the button presser foot, I would just sew these buttons on by hand, which I don't really like to do. I don't know why. I don't really like sewing buttons on, but it could be done by hand. And then, like I said, if you don't sew, you could knit or crochet a band and then sew buttons onto the end. That's it. Last thing is just to trim my threads, and then these can be washed when you use and wash your reusable DIY cloth facial masks, or if you're a medical professional, They can be used with your surgical masks, and then of course, you know, you would treat them like you would any of the things, you know, only for any of us, you know, only touching them when your hands are clean and being careful with them when you take them off. And then now I have another of the ear savers all ready to go, just like that. And then this will just go right behind the head, and then the mask ear elastic just connects on both sides, and this just goes right behind the head. Great. Have a great day.